Welcome to the deep dive. So, picture your life as a car for a second. From the moment we are old enough to basically understand the concept of a future, we're taught to grip the steering wheel of that car as tightly as possible.
Right.
You're supposed to set your goals, uh, optimize your habits, make your choices, and ultimately just chart your own course.
I mean, it is the defining metric of a successful modern life,
Right.
right? Autonomy. The more control you have over your circumstances, the more successful you supposedly are.
Exactly. But imagine what it would look like to just take your hands completely off the wheel. And I don't mean just letting go of the big life-altering decisions like what career path to take or where to live.
You mean everything.
Yeah, everything. I mean, handing over the steering wheel of every single breath you take, every heartbeat, every mundane thought you have while you're just standing in line for coffee.
Well, you're talking about pushing the concept of letting go to an absolute dizzying extreme. It's a level of radical surrender that, honestly, most people would find terrifying.
Terrifying, maybe, yeah. But to millions of people around the world right now, it's the ultimate goal. Today, we are exploring the profound and, frankly, highly complex spiritual framework of Luisa Picaretta.
Right.
She was an Italian mystic who lived in Corrado, Italy, and she passed away in 1947.
And her influence is currently surging. Her cause for beatification, which is the Catholic Church's official, rigorous process for recognizing someone as a saint, is actively underway right now.
Wow.
Yeah, and our focus today relies on a massive stack of sources. At the center is this booklet of her daily reflections titled A Light on Your Journey for Each Day of the Year. It was compiled from her personal letters by Sister Assunta Marigliano.
But it's not just the book, right? Surrounding that text is a sprawling global ecosystem of modern devotion that has totally sprung up around her writings.
Oh, absolutely, it's huge.
So when I first started reading through her letters, I assumed living in the divine will, which is, her core concept. I thought it just meant being a really good person. Like, you follow the rules, you try not to be selfish, you align your actions with what you believe God wants.
Yeah, and that is actually the most common hurdle for people approaching her work.
Mm-hmm.
In her framework, simply being a good person who follows the rules implies that you still have your own independent human will.
Right.
You're looking at God's rules, and your human will is choosing to cooperate with them. But what Luisa Picaretta is advocating for is an active, total substitution.
A substitution.
Yes, the human will doesn't cooperate. It is entirely removed and replaced by God's will.
Which she calls a martyrdom. In the reflections from June and December, she describes this process, but she clarifies that it's not a martyrdom of blood or flesh like, the historical saints who were killed for their faith.
Right, it's different.
Yeah, she calls it a martyrdom of the will, which never dies.
Think about the weight of that phrase for a second. A martyrdom that never dies implies a continuous, unyielding state of surrender. You don't just hand over the keys once. You have to hand them over every single second of your existence.
Okay, let me try a modern analogy here to map out the mechanics of this for you. Think about a smartphone. Doing good deeds or trying to be a moral person is essentially like downloading a really helpful app onto your phone.
Okay, I like this.
You're still running your own operating system, your own human will. You just have a nice ethical program running on top of it.
Right, the core programming hasn't actually changed. You've just added a feature.
Exactly. But what Picaretta is demanding is a total factory reset. You completely wipe the phone's hard drive and you install a brand new divine operating system. You aren't just running a good app anymore. The core architecture has fundamentally changed.
Yeah.
In her July reflection, she writes that when you truly live in this divine will, it is not you who speaks, works, walks, and loves. It is literally God who speaks, works, walks, and loves through your physical body.
So the hardware remains yours, but the user is completely different. And the mechanism for this total system reboot is encapsulated in a single Latin word that basically forms the absolute bedrock of her theology. And that word is fiat.
Which translates simply to, let it be done.
Exactly. It's the ultimate yes.
Hmm.
But in her September writings, it's clear the fiat isn't just passive acceptance. It is a highly active mechanism. She insists that this word must constantly be on the lips, in the mind, and in the heart.
So practitioners are instructed to place the fiat before and after every single action they take, no matter how small.
Every single one, yeah.
But if we run with this operating system analogy, wiping the hard drive and replacing it with the divine OS creates a massive, immediate, real-world problem.
How so?
Well, what happens when the computer gets a virus? What happens when tragedy strikes, and the brutal friction of human life hits you? If you have no will of your own, how are you supposed to process suffering?
Ah, yes. This is where her theology completely upends how we usually view trauma and pain. Typically, human beings view suffering as a problem to be solved, or something to endure, or something to escape as quickly as possible, right?
Of course.
But in Picaretta's framework, suffering is treated as an active, incredibly valuable currency.
Yeah, in the January texts, she writes that as many pains as you suffer and as many tears as you shed, there are angels actively gathering them around you. She calls these sufferings pearls that are formed to be brought to the divine.
There is a really striking image in her July letters where she claims that total resignation to the divine will actually empties the cross and renders it light.
Wait, empties it?
Yeah, the claim is that by completely handing over your resistance to the pain, a sweet blood descends into your veins, which physically and spiritually sweetens the bitterness of the suffering. The suffering itself is alchemized. It transforms from a pointless tragedy into something with divine utility.
But here's where her writings get incredibly challenging. She draws a hard, massive line between suffering, which is this precious pearl, and emotional disturbance.
Right, they're very different things to her.
Very different. I mean, in March, she calls normal human fears, doubts, and restlessness infernal breaths and rags of hell. And then in October, she describes internal disturbance as the hail of the soul, which basically destroys all true goods.
She holds absolutely nothing back when describing the damage caused by emotional turmoil.
I really have to push back on this on behalf of the listener because we are living in an era of unprecedented anxiety. Calling our everyday fears and doubts rags of hell feels incredibly harsh.
It does sound intense.
How is this not just a 20th century version of extreme spiritual toxic positivity? Like if someone loses their job or a family member gets sick, they're going to be disturbed? Slapping a divine will sticker over a panic attack and smiling through it just sounds like sticking your head in the sand.
Right.
It sounds like repressing trauma.
And if the goal was just forced cheerfulness, you would be entirely correct. Repression is taking a dark, painful reality and violently shoving it down into the basement of your psyche while painting a smile on your face.
Yeah, exactly.
But Picaressa is describing a completely different psychological and spiritual mechanism. It's not about ignoring reality. It's about acquiring what she terms divine sight.
Okay, so how does divine sight actually prevent disturbance without resorting to repression?
Consider a metaphor from her February texts. She calls peace the daylight of God. Think about the physical properties of daylight. Daylight doesn't change the objects in a room, right?
No.
It simply allows you to see them exactly as they are, without shadows or distortion. When you are disturbed, when you're thrashing about in anxiety, you are operating in the dark. Your ego is reacting blindly to the pain.
So the anxiety is actually obscuring the reality of the situation.
Yes. By maintaining an imperturbable peace, she argues that you aren't ignoring the suffering, you are turning the lights on. Peace removes the veil of the suffering. And in her October reflections, she says this allows the believer to recognize the finger of God in their adversities.
Ah.
It requires the deep anchoring stability of knowing that if the operating system is divine, then external circumstances, no matter how chaotic, cannot actually crash the computer. Disturbance, in her view, is just the human ego violently trying to snatch the steering wheel back in a moment of panic.
Okay, that distinction makes it much more robust than just toxic positivity. It's not about pretending it doesn't hurt. It's about maintaining a profound internal stability so you don't compound the pain with blind panic.
Exactly.
So we have the total surrender of the fiat, and we have this alchemy of suffering through peace. Let's zoom in on how this actually operates, because grand theories of suffering are one thing, but what does this look like on a random Tuesday morning when you're just, doing the laundry?
Oh, it gets breathtakingly granular. The most unique signature of her writings, and you see this in April and August, is her absolute insistence that true sanctity has almost nothing to do with sweeping historical deeds or massive public gestures.
Right.
It is entirely located in the microscopic details of mundane life.
She writes that the divine will must have its royal place in eating, in sleeping, in moving a hand, even in a single breath. Every tiny act done in this state of surrender increases a new divine likeness inside the person, according to her July text.
Which immediately raises a massive psychological question. How do you actually maintain that level of conscious surrender while answering emails or driving to the grocery store? The human brain is just a distraction machine.
It really is. But the letters actually provide some incredibly specific rules for the mind to achieve this. And reading them today, they feel almost violently opposed to our modern culture.
They really do.
The first rule is forget the past. In October, she states bluntly that those who think of the past lose the present. And in January, she says that ruminating on history harms you a great deal.
Which is wild, because we live in a culture obsessed with the past. We doom scroll, we dissect our childhoods in therapy, we endlessly analyze our historical traumas to figure out who we are.
But her framework demands you drop it entirely. Why? Because the past is a ghost. The divine will only operates in the active present moment. You cannot offer your fiat yesterday. You can only offer it right now.
And that ties directly into her second rule for the mind. Ignore your own weaknesses.
Yeah.
In March, she warns that the more a person thinks about their miseries and flaws, the more they will feel them.
Which again, completely flies in the face of modern self-improvement. We are basically taught to hyperanalyze our flaws so we can fix them.
But from Picaretta's perspective, analyzing your flaws is just a clever trap set by the ego. Whether you are obsessing over how great you are or obsessing over how terrible you are still obsessing over yourself.
Right, it's still about you.
Exactly. It is a redirect of attention back to the human will.
Which brings us to the third, and undoubtedly the hardest, rule. Stop thinking about yourself completely. In July and September, she writes that each thought of yourself is a void of love, a literal little escape from the arms of Jesus.
It requires a complete and utter eradication of self-consciousness.
You know, when I was looking at these 3 rules, stay relentlessly in the present, don't analyze your mistakes, and stop focusing on your ego, it struck me that she is basically describing the mechanics of what modern psychologists call the flow state.
Oh, the zone where athletes or artists perform at their absolute peak.
Exactly. Think about a concert pianist. The thousands of hours of practice are there, but the moment the pianist becomes consciously aware of their own fingers hitting the keys, they stumble.
Yep.
They mess up. The muscle memory only takes over when the ego shuts up and they just exist. The metacognition has to turn off.
The mechanics of the flow state are identical to what she's describing, for sure. But the engine powering it is completely different. In sports or art, flow is powered by intense neurological focus and physical muscle memory. In Picaretta's theology, this spiritual flow state is powered by something she calls filial abandonment. You see this heavily in the August texts.
Acting like a child.
Essentially, yes. She frequently uses the image of living like a little baby in the arms of its mother. A baby doesn't ruminate on what it did wrong yesterday.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't analyze its character flaws. It doesn't stress about how it's going to require its next meal. It rests entirely in the present moment, completely unself-conscious, relying totally on a larger, more powerful will to sustain it. She is trying to cultivate a spiritual muscle memory, where the divine takes over the moment you stop getting in your own way.
So we've just spent time looking at the smallest possible unit of human life. A single, unself-conscious breath at the grocery store. A micro moment of flow. But if we take the camera now and pan all the way out, this theology doesn't stay in the grocery store line.
Not at all.
It scales up to an unimaginable cosmic level.
This is where the mundane becomes highly mystical. In her framework, the individual is not isolated. Those tiny granular acts are intrinsically linked to the entire cosmos. It's a spiritual butterfly effect, where the flapping of a wing genuinely alters the universe.
Yeah, in February, she claims that one single act done in the state of total surrender surpasses the greatness of heaven and earth. And in June, she notes that the simple, "I love you," whispered by a human on earth physically resounds throughout heaven.
The culmination of this idea is her promise in December that every time a person truly abandons themselves to the divine will, the celestial baby repeats his birth.
Meaning an individual's internal psychological surrender actually acts as a conduit that triggers a cosmic divine event in real time.
Yes.
The divine life continuously enters the world through these microscopic human choices.
It places a staggering amount of cosmic importance on the absolute most ordinary moments of a human lifespan.
And what is truly wild about all of this is that it isn't just an abstract theory hidden in a dusty, forgotten book from the 1940s. If we look at the immense stack of modern sources we have today, the footprint of Louisa Picaretta's theology is explosive.
Explosive is the right word.
We are looking at a highly organized, active, global movement.
The sheer volume of modern devotion built around her writings is overwhelming. It is a living, breathing international ecosystem.
To give you a sense of the scale here, there are massive international conferences held in her hometown of Corrado, Italy, drawing practitioners from every corner of the globe.
And there are incredibly detailed, synchronized schedules for people practicing the 24 hours of the Passion.
Which is her method of meditating on Christ's final hours around the clock in shifts.
Right. Exactly. You also see an endless array of novenas, which are structured, 9-day periods of focused prayer, and highly specific liturgical calendars.
Right, adapting the normal church seasons specifically to integrate her teachings on the divine will. They even have dedicated smartphone apps. You can download Spanish and English divine will apps right now to keep you connected to her daily readings and alert you to prayer times.
It's totally modernized.
And her legacy is backed by prominent figures. People like Padre Bernardino Bucci, who spent his life systematizing her teachings into newsletters and biographies, or Saint Annibale di Francia, who was an extraordinary supporter, editor, and publisher of her work while she was alive.
And he was actually canonized, officially made a saint by Pope Benedict XVI.
Wow.
Yeah. The involvement of canonized saints and the sheer structural organization of this movement today reveals something fascinating about our current cultural moment. You have to ask, why is this specific, highly demanding 20th century mystic gaining such incredible global traction right now in the age of the internet?
I think it comes down to the environment we live in. We live in an era where we possess more choices than any humans in the history of the world. We have endless apps on our phones, endless potential career paths, endless forms of entertainment.
Endless ways to optimize our diets and our sleep.
Right. And with that endless choice comes endless, paralyzing anxiety. Psychologists call it choice fatigue. We are completely overwhelmed by the crushing burden of having to constantly steer our own lives in a world with entirely too many roads.
Because every decision feels like it could make or break our happiness.
Yes. So what Luisa Piccaretta's singular obsessive focus on the divine will offers is the ultimate antidote to choice fatigue. It is a radical, highly structured simplicity.
It speaks directly to a deep modern hunger to just put down the burden of the self. In an age of relentless information overload and self-optimization, the idea that your only actual job, your only true cosmic responsibility is to hand over your will and let a divine operating system take the wheel is incredibly appealing.
It completely removes the crushing weight of the ego.
It does. It provides a clear, uncompromising framework for existing that applies just as perfectly to doing the dishes as it does to enduring a massive personal tragedy.
The paradox is striking, honestly. The louder and more complex our modern world gets, the more deeply appealing this microscopic, silent surrender becomes.
Very well said.
So let's bring all of the pieces of this massive framework together. We've covered a remarkable amount of ground today, diving into the mind of Luisa Piccarreta.
We started by unpacking the core engine of her theology, the fiat, that unyielding, continuous yes that seeks to completely replace the human will with the divine will, acting as a total factory reset for the soul.
We examined how this divine operating system entirely reframes human suffering. It doesn't repress or ignore pain, it alchemizes it into spiritual pearls, and it demands a rigorous practice of imperturbable peace.
Turning on the daylight of God so you aren't blinded by your own emotional disturbances.
Exactly. We also explored the intense mechanics of the mundane, how living this out requires us to ruthlessly forget the past, ignore our own weaknesses, and achieve a state of spiritual muscle memory, filial abandonment in our smallest daily actions.
And finally, we zoomed out to see the spiritual butterfly effect. How a single breath of surrender supposedly echoes across the cosmos, and how that promise has cultivated a sprawling, highly organized, modern devotion filled with apps, international conferences, and dedicated followers seeking an antidote to modern anxiety.
It is a framework that challenges our absolute, most basic assumptions about what it means to live a good life.
It really is.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. We spend our entire modern existence fighting tooth and nail for autonomy. We are constantly trying to maximize our personal choices, to exert our own will over our careers, our bodies, our relationships, and our futures.
We operate on the fundamental assumption that ultimate freedom means having both hands firmly gripped on the steering wheel with the power to drive wherever we want, whenever we want.
Right. It is the unquestioned metric of success in the 21st century. But what if the mystics know something we don't? What if the ultimate peak of human freedom is actually found in the exact opposite direction? What if true, lasting freedom isn't found in gripping the wheel tighter, but in the terrifying, radical, and complete surrender of our will to something infinitely larger than ourselves?
It's a question that completely upends the entire modern world.
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take care, and we'll see you next time.